Coming up on the Sky News Daily with me, Niall Paterson. After 2 years of civil war in Sudan, our Africa correspondent, Yousra Elbagir, returns home. But what did she find when she got there?
You asked and we listened.
The first 100 days of Trump 2.0 is almost over, but we're not done yet.
So we're keeping the podcast going every weekday at 6 a.m.
Join us to stay up to date with the latest twists and turns.
For interviews and analysis.
And stories from across the United States.
You can listen to Sky News Trump 100 now, wherever you get your podcasts.
For 2 long, bloody years, there's been civil war in Sudan. The conflicts between the Sudanese Armed Forces and the paramilitary Rapid Support Forces, or RSF, has seen famine, destruction, and millions driven from their homes. Among them, the family and friends of our Africa correspondent, Yousra Elbagir. In fact, she was born in Khartoum and recently returned. This was the moment she arrived home, the family home. Her mother was forced to flee.
It's just so much grief. And at the same time, I know it could have been much worse. They could have been here when these guys came in.
And Yousra's on the podcast, still in Sudan. Yousra, we've covered the backstory to the civil war on the podcast before. We'll put the links in the episode description. But this trip, though, it was different. It was the first time back in the family home. Ahead of making that journey, how did that make you feel?
I really can't explain it. It was a mixed bag, to be honest. There was a lot of anticipation, a nervousness, almost like an anxiety. I was itching to get back. I was itching to go in. As it got closer, it started to be quite daunting. I could feel the weight of what was going to happen. I could feel how much it would throw me. I'd feel winded. I'd feel hurt. So it started to get quite scary, I think, as I got closer, because I knew how much it would bring up and how much that house means to me. And it did. And that's not just my experience. It's the experience of millions of people, 13 million people displaced from their homes. And all of them have a place that they will go back to and will have to rebuild and will have to reckon with what was left after the war kind of tore its way through, not just the capital, but cities across Sudan.
Just explain the physical effect that these 2 years of conflict have had on Sudan.
I mean, the capital city, large parts of it are devastated. We've seen buildings burnt to a husk, completely blackened. The skyscrapers that used to line the confluence of the Nile, where the 2 Niles meet, at the center of the capital city, are all almost checkered, the buildings shattered. We've seen the National Museum just driving past, completely shattered windows and empty rooms that held artifacts that were thousands of years old. Homes burnt almost to the point of floors looking like they were half demolished, bullet holes in buildings. You know, as we drive through Khartoum, all those points of familiarity, the places that were bustling, people would be drinking tea under, trees, and everyone would be gathered and laughing, and there were restaurants everywhere. It's now completely emptied. People just have left everything that they have behind. And now the city that they remember doesn't exist. And that's where the shock is. But there are also places in the capital that have survived, places that are still busy, where people didn't have the choice to leave, where they gathered where they could and tried to kind of buy and sell things just to keep going, just to survive. There are these pockets of life, resilient life, that still exist, and then there are places that are just ransacked and empty. And I think that really is a picture, not just of the capital, but of the country.
You also took the journey to the family home. Now, when I think of returning home, that's always a joyous thing. I wonder if there was any of that in your mind as you made your way back home.
I knew that it wouldn't be happy. And that was what was so painful, is that usually I come home and I'm just so excited, and I know I'm gonna just see my family and my friends, and I'm gonna just let my hair down and just exhale and just eat and be merry and take a break. And this was just the complete opposite of that feeling. It was the dread of not knowing, but it was also knowing how much has changed. Knowing what I've seen in other people's homes wasn't likely to have happened to my home.
Been waiting for this for 2 years. And it's not a celebration. It doesn't feel like a big homecoming. It feels like this was so unnecessary, so preventable. And now we're just going back to the ruins.
Another painful part of a very painful journey, but what did you find when you finally did get home?
I found family photos, and I think that really helped. You know, I spoke to a friend of mine who had the same thing, who's a journalist who stayed here throughout the war, and she went to her house, and whatever documents or photos they had were burnt in a fire in the middle of a room. So she was like, wow, you found your photos? And it's a big deal to find photo albums that we've been flicking through for 20 years, to find photos of weddings, you know, of gatherings that we've had, of moments that we felt were worth capturing. Finding those photos meant a lot to me because we've seen people's baby photos thrown and discarded under one of the bridges here. I think it's not about the physical photo, it's about a reminder of what actually matters and what we are looking for when we go to these places. I think most people know that their homes have been looted, but you kind of give up on the TV and you give up on the, washing machine, but finding those remnants of the life that you had here can really help put things into perspective. And that's what it did for me. And I hope other people get to have that.
This was a place that had not been looted. It had almost been defiled. That this was a place of family, of memory, of youth, of growing up and growing old. And it had been defiled by those who had come through, who had torn stuff off the walls.
Absolutely, it has been defiled. And I don't think that senseless, crude violence is any different to the violence that we've been recording over the last 2 years, the violence against children, the violence against women, the violence against helpless, vulnerable people. That is the modus operandi, what we're seeing on every level, whether it's the painting of my grandma with the kind of punctured hole in her forehead, or it is the children and the women we've spoken to who have experienced atrocious things. It's on a spectrum, and underneath it is this brutality that the people here do not deserve. There is no other way to describe this war than senseless. It was a power struggle between two security partners that has been completely taken out on the people.
You managed to have a video chat with your mum from the family home.
It's been really painful for my mother.
I never thought that I'll see my house like that. This is my house for the end of my life. I was supposed to die here in this house. I was supposed to be buried here in my country. I was supposed to enjoy my garden and my place. I was supposed to cook and cater for you and your children. I was supposed to be here for the rest of my life. Alhamdulillah, thank God for everything.
My mother loves her home. She's put her blood, sweat, and tears into her home. She's done it for us. She's created a place where she had hoped to see generations of our family come through. My nieces spent the first years of their life there. Her garden, her and my brother tended to and planted mango trees and pomegranate trees and jasmine trees, and we would all kind of sit and enjoy it together. And I think for her, the grief is extremely painful and deep. I think she sees that she will never do this again, that she doesn't have enough time left to start from scratch and do what she did with that house. And she said to me on the phone, I've furnished my house, I've done what I could. Now I'm gonna just live in your homes and move around. And I think for her, that's really, really painful. That generation of Sudanese people, they are the kind of independence children. They were born just before colonialism ended, and they were building a nation, and they never left. They were investing in their country. They weren't going to stay anywhere else. And for them to see that they believe that they have failed us. Of course, that's not true. Of course, wars happen. That is not the fault of any generation, but they take it so heavily, and they really see these symbols of destruction as a personal failure.
Yousra, was there any point when you're standing in the wreckage of your family home, sifting through those possessions, the photographs, the memories, was there any point at which you thought, do you know what, I could see myself being back here one day, I can see the family being back here one day?
Honestly, no. Not in this iteration, not anytime soon. I think the reality is that the war isn't over. While we've been here, there have been drone strikes on displacement shelters. There's been shelling. We can hear stray gunfire, even in safe zones. I don't know if we could feel safe in that home anytime soon. That is a luxury to decide whether to go back or not, because we've now been to places in the capital that are so poor that people have either not had the means to leave, or they've rushed back as soon as they could because they can't afford to live in displacement. But I think that's where we'll have to find ways to stay in touch, to rebuild, to not completely abandon our home and not abandon our neighborhood or our city. And that's where it's a very delicate dance. You don't want to completely desert the city and leave it to, if not militiamen, the elements. But I also don't feel like I would ever feel comfortable with my elderly parents being in that house again, especially after we had to work so hard to get them out safely. I do hope that it becomes habitable one day, and I hope that it becomes safe for the people who need to come back. But things will never be the same again, and that's just the reality.
So right now, as of this second, I mean, just there is no sign of any resolution, no sign of the two warring parties coming together and putting the guns down?
No, the only outcome, and this has been made clear by both warring parties, is total victory. The war is being fought between the paramilitary rapid support forces known as the RSF and the Sudanese Armed Forces, the military. And they have been security partners for years. The RSF were armed during the rebellions in Darfur in the early 2000s, and they carried out what was later called by the US a genocide against non-Arab tribes there. As they were trained by the army, they eventually, post-revolution, wanted total control or autonomy from the armed forces, and that power struggle erupted into all-out war in the capital in April 2023. The army has refused to come to the negotiation table with the RSF, so they basically never really agreed on a peace agreement or a ceasefire agreement, and I don't think that's going to change. The army got the capital city back. This is the total victory that they wanted, and this is the reason this war started, is this struggle for total control. I don't think it's going to be a happy ending, and then we will spend the rest of our lives trying to, I guess, address the remnants of the militants that came into the capital and occupied it for 2 years. So it's a long road ahead, and I think the status quo, which people protested against in the revolution, military rule, is now, for many people, the best option, the lesser of two evils.
Do you have any optimism about the future for your country? I mean, as you say, independence in 1956. Since then, 20 attempted military coups and a 2-year civil war. This feels like a country that has been and will continue to be very, very unstable.
My optimism is in the Sudanese people, Neil. I have complete faith in the community here to survive, and they have survived. A part of the problem here is this myth that Sudan is inherently ungovernable, that people here will just have at each other, and that they can't find a way or a pathway to peace. And that is the biggest disservice that's been done to people here. You know, people here are up against a lot, but they are still surviving, and they are still here. And that is what gives me hope. I don't think that we can sit and wait for the international community to intervene. Sudan has been utterly failed by the international community, not just over the last 2 years of war, but also during the political transition after the revolution. But they have managed, through community kitchens, through emergency response rooms, through mutual aid, through remittances, through fundraising campaigns abroad, they have managed to support each other. And that is why what has been attacked here feels very superficial. the material value of our city can be taken, but the people who have remained will never be broken.
Yousra, I'm certain you will have taken mementos, family mementos, photos from the wreckage of the family home. I'm just wondering if you've also perhaps taken a sense of closure about at least this chapter in your family's history.
Absolutely. I feel acceptance, and I also feel grateful that it was just theft. I can't explain it because, you know, we worked so hard to get my family out, to get my parents out, to get people out of that house. And now that I've seen the house, I can't imagine what would have happened to them when they were inside it. And there are many people who weren't able to escape, who weren't able to leave, who were attacked in their homes, who were detained, who were trapped, who were raped, who were burnt alive. And that is the real tragedy of this war. And I think I have my feelings, and I'm upset, and I'm sad, and we are all grieving. But I think everyone in my family is well aware that we've come off very lightly. And so I do feel closure, and I feel like this war has given us a lot to learn, and we will work through it. And all we can do right now is kind of pick out the bits that remain and piece them together and step back and appreciate the fact that we're here to do that.
Thanks, Yousra. And her full report is available on the website, skynews.com, and links to previous episodes of the podcast discussing Sudan, we've put those in the description. The Daily is back tomorrow.
You asked and we listened.
The first 100 days of Trump 2.0 is almost over, but we're not done yet.
So we're keeping the podcast going every weekday at 6 a.m.
Join us to stay up to date with the latest twists and turns.
for interviews and analysis.
And stories from across the United States.
You can listen to Sky News Trump 100 now, wherever you get your podcasts.